Where you are right now, Mama Tutu, Archbishop Thabo Makgoba, members of the Tutu family, and leaders of the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation, the Premier of the Western Cape, the Mayor of Cape Town, distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, and fellow South Africans. Marlene, if I knew that you sing so well, and particularly when it comes to Tumamina, I should have asked you to, as I was delivering the State of the Nation address, just at that point when I referred to Hugh Masekela's song, I should have asked you to come and sing it, because Julius Malema, sitting in the audience, obviously in his parliamentary seat, if some of you heard him, as soon as I mentioned this song, he said, "Sing it." And he repeated it twice. He said, "Sing it." I was tempted to sing it, but I thought wise not to, on his instruction, that is. But if I had known that you could sing, I would have asked you to sing it for me. So thank you very much, Marlene. It really is a great honor and a great privilege to be given this opportunity to deliver this 8th annual Desmond Tutu International Peace Lecture. Since the inception of this lecture, it has served as a platform for robust engagement on the struggle that we must all continue to wage for a more humane and a kind and just world. Precisely the values that Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu has always stood for. Allow me to express my sincere gratitude and that of all South Africans to Archbishop Desmond Tutu for a lifetime that has been spent in the service of peace, understanding, and social justice. If there is any South African who has spent his entire life just talking about peace and social justice, I know no other than Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu. So we thank him for that. So yesterday, as the Arch celebrated his 87th birthday, together with our icon here, we marveled at the generosity of spirit, the strength of character, and the love of humanity that he has exuded for as long as many of us, if not all of us, have known him. This lecture on peace, named in the honor of the Arch, is taking place exactly 2 weeks after the United Nations held a Nelson Mandela Peace Summit at its annual General Assembly. And this was a peace summit in which more than 100 heads of government and heads of state participated in honor of Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. At the end of the debate, they declared that the next decade, starting from this year, would be the Nelson Mandela Decade of Peace. This is a real honor for us as South Africans. This is an honor not only for Nelson Mandela, but also for the work that the two Nobel laureates, Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu, born out of our great and beautiful country, have done for the cause of peace for humanity as a whole. And we thank them deeply for the work they have done. Now, this is work that should fill us with enormous pride as South Africans, not arrogance. It should fill us with great humility, not pomposity as a nation. As South Africans, we are privileged to be associated with those two global icons, including one here as well, sitting here, whose extraordinary struggles earned them international recognition, but it earned them international recognition as torchbearers along humanity's arduous and difficult journey towards lasting peace and stability for the people of this whole world. Former President Nelson Mandela and Emeritus Archbishop Desmond Tutu have been beacons of hope, not only for South Africans struggling under the yoke of racial oppression, but also to the billions of many other people across the world who yearn for a future that is peaceful and stable. To advance peace, we need to appreciate that at no stage in human development have people been engaged in conflict without cause. Conflict is not the natural human state. It is the product of a set of social, political, cultural, and at times also religious circumstances that pits a brother against a brother, and admittedly, to a lesser extent, a sister against a sister. If we can address those circumstances that cause war, we reduce the potential for discord and ultimately create the conditions for the end of conflict. This was one of the central themes that emerged during the United Nations debate that led finally to the Nelson Mandela Peace Summit Declaration, where heads of state argued that conflict and hostility mainly have their roots in poverty, in exclusion, and marginalization. We said that peace is not possible in an unequal world. Peace would be eminently possible in a world where we have equality. And no society can be at peace unless all its people have equal rights, equal opportunities, and equal quality of life. As South Africans, we know that peace is not merely the absence of war, but also the absence of injustice. There are still millions in our society who live in poverty, who are socially excluded and economically marginalized, right here in our own country. We cannot speak of true freedom when the constitutionally guaranteed rights to quality health care, to quality education, to decent housing, and to clean environment continue not to be enjoyed by many South Africans. We cannot speak of true freedom when 10% of the population has more wealth than the remaining 90% combined, when women are discriminated against in their workplace and are abused in their homes, and when privilege and poverty follow the same racial contours of our colonial past. We will not be able to say we have achieved freedom for all our people until we have corrected the historical injustice of accumulation by a minority on the basis of dispossession of the majority. Until we do that, until we build a South Africa in which the wealth is shared amongst the people and the land is shared among all those who work it, we will not be able to realize lasting peace, nor will we have the type of stability that can yield the best life. It is nearly 25 years since we embarked upon this part of our long journey to peace and to freedom. Having brought an end to the heinous crime of apartheid, we set out to put right the wrongs of the past and to build a new society. An essential part of that journey was the search for truth and reconciliation, which found its manifestation in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission under the leadership, the very able leadership of Archbishop Desmond Tutu. It was rooted in the understanding that there would be no peace in our land without justice. The TRC was itself a key instrument of justice in a country that was in transition, a country that was in motion from a past of human rights violation to democracy. The TRC required that the perpetrators of gross human rights abuses to account for their actions, but it also provided them with an opportunity to recognize the humanity of their victims and exposed to them the myth of racial superiority. Burnt into our collective memory are the images of how distressed Archbishop Desmond Tutu was as he heard the evidence of the horrors and atrocities meted out against our people by agents of a murderous system that was entirely based on the false hierarchy of races. Those images serve as a reminder that while our democratic government has done a lot to advance justice for our people, since the TRC completed its work some 20 years ago, the trauma of apartheid, but also its very dark shadow, lingers on in the daily lives of many of our people. This is the trauma and the dark shadow, not of torture. It is not the trauma of detention, of death squad, but it continues to be the trauma and the dark shadow of hunger, of homelessness, of illness, illiteracy, and unemployment. There are none who have seen the conditions which so many South Africans live, who could deny that the deliberate impoverishment of black people in our country is itself a gross violation of human rights. It is for this reason that our efforts to radically transform the South African economy and to make it a lot more inclusive and to make it more of an economy that could be shared by all. All these efforts are located in the context of the restorative justice that defines the work of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and which he also addressed at the TRC and beyond. In this sense, the process of truth and reconciliation will not be complete until we have acknowledged the economic and social injustices of the past and also taken steps to correct them so that the steps that we take can pave a much better future for all our people. This is a responsibility that falls both on those who have been the beneficiaries of racial privilege and those who have suffered its debilitating effects. In this task, we are joined together. And each time I say that those who have benefited immensely from the system of the past have a responsibility to stand up and be counted, many start shying away and hiding in some dark corners. And today I want to repeat that it is our joint responsibility to correct the wrongs of the past as South Africans working together and doing this collectively as a nation. We have a shared interest in the fundamental transformation of our economy and our society. It cannot be done by one section of our economy, of our country alone. It has to be a joint effort. We have a shared interest in significantly and urgently reducing inequality and discrimination in all forms and manifestations. We need to reduce the massive disparity in income and opportunity in South Africa, particularly between black and white, and also between men and women. This requires nothing short of a skills revolution in which inclusive, accessible, and relevant education produces quality outcomes. It is essential that alongside a skills revolution, we draw millions more young South Africans into the productive economy of our country through work. Last week, the social partners that we have in our country, organized as labor, organized as business and community organizations, and indeed as well as government, convened a job summit, which was the culmination of several months of deliberation on measures to accelerate job creation. It was a clear signal from all these four social partners of the determination that they have as labor, business, community, and government to put aside all differences and to decide to work together to build a social compact to create jobs. They decided on a number of measures and interventions which, when effectively and timeously implemented, will almost double the number of jobs that we are able to create as an economy every year. They decided that they are going to take the bull by the horns and make sure that they address this national crisis that we are going through of joblessness. Alongside the work being done by the social partners to generate employment, it is essential that our economy expands and that we are able to mobilize far greater levels of productive investment. It is important, therefore, that we ensure that new investment is directed towards meaningful job creation, that local labor is prioritized as these investments are spread throughout our country, that emerging black and women entrepreneurs are empowered and communities ultimately benefit. The dispossession of black people of their land manifested itself in a violent manner, completely bereft of any notions of peace. Apartheid ensured that it stripped black people, Africans, coloreds, and Indians of their land and their assets, impoverishing families for generations and robbing them of their dignity. The evictions of farm workers, especially here in the Western Cape, unfortunately continue to this day. And they are a blight on our efforts to make sure that there is peace as well. It is therefore vital, if we are to restore the dignity of our people and break the cycle of poverty, that we address the land question so that there can be peace and prosperity for all and amongst our people collectively as a whole. Now, the taking of land from our people was not a peaceful process. It introduced violence, militating against precisely what the Arch has always sought to see happening in his life. And if we address this question, we will be able to have a chance also to heal the wounds of the past. It is in this context that we must understand the drive to accelerate land reform through redistribution, restitution, and tenure security for all South Africans and not just for a few South Africans, which has been the case in the past. Now, this issue of land has reared its head in a way where some people think that it has been manufactured by politicians and by political parties. No, its time had come. Our people want their freedom to have meaning. And for their freedom to have meaning, that important asset which is land, which is an economic instrument, needs to be restored to the hands of our people so that they can improve their lives. So it is in the interest of both social justice and economic development that we ensure that the land is shared amongst all those who work it and all those who need it. The drafters of the Freedom Charter were right, because the land having been taken from our people and given to a minority, in 1955, in their great visionary and foresightful wisdom, they said, all we ever want is that the land must be shared amongst those who work it and those who need it. They need it now, and let's make it available. Effective land reform, where emerging farmers are provided with adequate support and poor households receive well-located land for housing in urban areas is both a moral as well as an economic imperative that will enhance the peace project. One writer wrote recently that we've got some 200,000 emerging farmers who are mostly black, who are in need of land. And he says that is the cohort that we initially need to focus on to make sure that these 200,000 emerging farmers, and they are lodged and located in the various communities throughout our country. Those are the 200,000 farmers who are yearning for the land to be shared because they are the ones who work the land. And we want to focus on them. And we are going to make sure that they have land that they can work to participate in the economic value chain of our country, and they look after their households and their children. Their time has come, and we will do it. This asset unleashes great economic potential, not only of the land, but also of the people who work it and live on it. In our search for a just and equal society, we also need to fundamentally transform the gender relations in our country. We cannot have a free society. We cannot have a peaceful world for as long as women are discriminated against, exploited, neglected, and abused. That cannot happen. We cannot tolerate the social norms and cultural practices that diminish in any way the equal rights and equal worth of the women of our country. That cannot be. This requires a change of attitude and consciousness, a social movement that reaches into every home, into every classroom, into every workplace, and every relationship. It requires policies and programs to ensure that every girl child attends school and has every opportunity to excel and to succeed, that there are no impediments for young women in our country to complete their schooling and to go on to higher education or training. That is what is important. It also means that every institution, from a government department to a company to university, should actively work to prevent gender bias, no matter how subtle or apparently inconsequential it might seem to be. We need to rid our country of gender bias because it should not belong to South Africa. We cannot have a peaceful society, fellow South Africans, for as long as women are physically, verbally, and emotionally abused because of their gender. They are easily the majority population in our country. Why do we want to suppress them? That should not be, and that should come to an end. The struggle to end gender-based violence must occupy all South Africans, since it is fundamental to our self-worth as individuals as well as a collective. It is fundamental to our vision of a society in which all have equal rights and an equal expectation of being able to exercise those rights. It is for this reason that we cannot tolerate discrimination against any person on the basis of their sexual orientation or gender identity. The violation of the rights and equal worth of lesbians, of gay people, bisexual, transgender, or intersex people demeans our common humanity as South Africans. Not only does it expose individuals to pain, suffering, and even violence, but it often limits access to social services and economic activities for LGBTI people in our country. It is not possible to build a just and equal society in such circumstances. It is our responsibility as a nation to dedicate every moment to eradicating all forms of racism, of sexism, of tribalism, homophobia, and other intolerances. Throughout his life, the Arch has been a soldier for peace. While we tend to speak about peace as a condition between nations or across a society as a whole, we often do not pay attention to peace in individual communities and in the lives of the individual citizen who make up such communities. In this regard, I want to express appreciation and gratitude for the Desmond and Tutu Legacy Foundation for the excellent work that it continues to do amongst ordinary people to secure peace in communities that are affected by many social ills, especially criminal violence. We remain very concerned about the scourge of violent crime in many communities across our country. This is an issue that calls for communities to come together and for religious, political, and social formations, as well as the South African Police Service, to work jointly to end the bloodshed, the tears, and the economic hardships that visits every family that loses its loved ones. We must do more to reverse the impact of apartheid urban spatial design on our social fabric. We also have to recenter our moral compass and ask ourselves as individuals, as well as families, what we can do to improve our own lives and the lives of others in our community. We welcome communities that speak out and take to the streets when the need arises to declare that they will not be terrorized into silence by the criminals who are roaming our streets and shooting people at random. We also commend communities that have taken action against social problems such as teenage pregnancy, substance abuse, domestic violence, gangsterism, and organized crime. Inspired by Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu, who has dedicated his life to securing a better future for all, let us work together as government, as labor, as communities to bring peace to the streets of our country and to the homes in our communities. From Bonteheerville and Kensington to Westbury and West Dean, we need a social and moral regeneration that ends the violence of crime, the violence of poverty, and the violence of despair. As we carry forward the legacy of Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu of building a nation that is truly at peace with itself and the world, we need voices like his to remind us of our constitutional obligation to build a united, non-racial, and non-sexist society. We have vivid memories of the Arch in his robes of service during his time on the streets of Soweto, downtown Johannesburg, Cape Town, Atlanta, London, and many other places. Those visions are still very much fresh in the minds of many of us. He coined the term Rainbow Nation, not out of sentiment, but out of experience, and out of the expectation that our nation would become one and remain one in perpetuity. Let us continue building the unity of our nation, conscious always of the fact that there will be no peace without equality and no reconciliation without justice. I want to conclude by suggesting that in honor of the outstanding work that Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu has contributed in raising our consciousness as a people and as a nation about peace, we should develop what I would call a doctrine of peace that should guide us so that we can acquire and give full meaning to what peace should really mean in our own country and indeed in the world. Peace should be about justice and fairness. And that is part of the doctrine of peace that I suggest. Peace should be about respecting the human rights of every human being. Peace should be about equal opportunity to develop as a human being. Peace should be about work. Yes, work. It should also be about ensuring that there is work and fair wages for those who work. Peace should be about bringing an end to poverty, to hunger, and inequality. Peace should also be about ensuring that there is housing for all, that there will be peace when there is universal health coverage for all. It should also be about the guns of war being silenced for good and forever. Yes, it should also be about having the freedom to speak, the freedom to worship, and the freedom of religion. That in itself is peace. Peace should be also about gender equality in every respect. Peace should be about women not being abused and children also not being abused. Peace should also be about the youth of our country and indeed our continent being empowered. But also importantly, peace should be about accepting the diversity of humanity and being tolerant of others in terms of how they live their lives, in terms of how they look, in terms of what language they speak, and in terms of how they behave. Peace should also be about the harmonious coexistence between people. It should also be about developing skills, the skills of all our people, and it should also be about the freedom to be, for every one of us to be what they want to be. In the end, peace should be our goal, just as it has been a lifelong goal to the Archbishop Desmond Tutu made peace his main mission in life, and he made it his goal. And this too should translate to us. We should make it our goal. But peace should also be about allowing people to have their own stories, to have their own thoughts, to have their own ideas, to have their own lifestyle, to have their own lives, and that they should be allowed to live their lives as they wish. And in this regard, we should keep trying to find peace. We should keep trying to build peace, just as the Arch has done throughout his life. And in this regard, we thank him deeply for having been so committed to the project of peace, for having throughout his life to ensure that he will spread the message of peace. And Arch, as you are watching, I thank you deeply that even in your retirement, you have continued to preach love and peace, and you've continued to build our nation based on those important values. Thank you very much, Arch. Thank you.
So